The Evening Standard Rugby Podcast with Lawrence Dallaglio.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Now, I've been left to my own devices this week. No Sarah and no Steve, so I thought I'd invite an old mate of mine onto the podcast for a bit of a yarn and a chance really to reminisce about a pretty big event, not just for us and the entire England squad, but I guess for England's sporting history, which took place, of course, 20 years ago this week. That, of course, is England lifting the 2003 Rugby World Cup. And my guest is no other than the man himself that led us all the way during that tournament. It's the one and only Martin Johnson. Johnno, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, mate. You?
Yeah, very well indeed. Now, you and I have caught up from time to time. There's been a flurry of little get-togethers, and one way or another, either this year or another year for obvious reasons. But I must admit, I never thought that we'd be celebrating the win 20 years ago, that a handful of us would actually be getting together in one of Her Majesty's prison, or His Majesty's prisons, recording Grand Slammers for ITV, which gave a few of us, including you and I, the chance to reflect on what happened back in 2003. I don't know about you, but I found that experience, other than just filming in a prison and all the sort of problems and issues that brought, there was a fair bit of emotion, really, getting, 8 or 9 of us back together, especially when we sat down over a beer, sort of in between filming. Do you get that sense as well?
I think the thing is with it, I see you a fair amount. I see quite a few of the guys quite a bit, but you never really have a chance to talk because you're at an event generally, and it's just, how you going, mate, blah, blah, blah. And if you do, it's only for 5 or 10 minutes. So to actually take time and just sit down and talk things through. The interesting thing is catching up with guys who you never see. And Ben Cohen was example of that, because I haven't seen much of Benny at all in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And obviously he's a very different guy. I mean, he's a very young guy in that team 20 years ago. So you're going to be a different bloke when you're in your mid-40s than you were in your early 20s. I think there was a lot of older, more experienced guys in that group who were still very sort of similar. You all change over 20 years, obviously. They're all pretty similar characters.
Yeah.
Where Benny, by his own admission, was very young, going through some interesting, difficult times as well in his life, and trying to be actually being a world-class athlete and rugby player at the same time. So, I think with the time, if you'd done that 10 years ago, it'd be a very different vibe than 20 years. I think that sort of that time elapsed gives everyone a chance to sort of look at things a little bit differently.
Johnno, just going back to just before 2003, before the World Cup, we played that autumn series, didn't we? New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and we won all 3 games.
You got sin-binned.
I got sin-binned, yeah.
Do you want me to take the blame for that?
No. I want you to explain what happened after we scored a pushover try against South Africa, and we took the game to over 50 points, I think. Which, I mean, nowadays,
in the autumn.
Nowadays, you wouldn't believe that South Africa would ever concede that many points. They probably wouldn't, but it was. Everyone talks about, obviously, the World Cup knockout stages and Wales, and we'll get onto that in a minute, and France, and obviously Australia ultimately. But I remember us thinking the hardest game of the World Cup for us is going to be that South Africa pool game. And that's the one that I remember probably being more nervous about that game than any other game that we'd ever played for England, ever, I think.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And by a distance as well.
And I mean, obviously, the game in the autumn preceding that was a bit of a struggle. South Africa came with intents to sort of physically dominate us, which they didn't do. They had a man sent off, and I think I seem to remember you were very politely asking the referee to maybe blow the whistle at the end of the game because it was tough, wasn't it?
Well, it was a funny game in the sense that it South Africa brought over a sort of mixed team. A lot of their younger, better players that were going to play the following year didn't come on that tour, so it was difficult for them. They'd lost to South Africa. They'd lost to Scotland the week before, so that wasn't great. And I think we'd we'd been warned on what their reaction would be, which it totally was to become very, very physical and basically, if they can't win the game, try and win whatever battle they. So I didn't really get the true sense of what it was like because I just felt it was a bit niggly.
Mm.
I didn't see a lot of the incidents that happened. I knew Johnny got taken out late or whatever, but
I don't think any of us.
If they-
I don't think any of us realised
No.
till after the game, bro. We just thought we're just involved in another usual. There was always more cotton ordered for England South Africa than any other game anyway. Really, because
yeah, and then it came out afterwards. Yeah, they were very feisty. They're very prideful. So when we put 50 on them, we pushed them over, which is, for South Africa to get pushed over for 50 points as well, it's like a double whammy. It was the days when the referee still adjudicated time; it wasn't done separately. And I just said it was Paddy O'Brien. I just looked at him and said, "Paddy, I blow the whistle." I said, "Nothing good's going to happen now." I said it was a couple of minutes to go.
Yeah.
I said, "Nothing good is going to happen now," and he did. But you're right. Corne Krika came off the field. Their captain, he was teared up. He was so upset, and he was pretty defiant. By the aftermatch, he was pretty defiant, and you what did he say? You twisted the knife. You twisted the knife today.
Yeah.
This is not Perth. This is not Perth. We'll see you in Perth.
Yeah.
So he laid the challenge down at sort of 11 months away.
Yeah.
And we always, that game was always going to be huge. Playing South Africa in the pool was always going to be massive.
I mean, in many ways, it's quite similar to Ireland's journey, because Ireland went into the tournament this time round as Grand Slam champions, as we did in 2003, and then they had a pool game against South Africa, which they had to win, and obviously they managed to win that. But I remember waking up the morning of after the South Africa game, and the Sydney Morning Herald had a picture of Johnny Wilkinson kicking a penalty goal, and I think we won 23-3 or something. I can't quite remember, but it was pretty emphatic in the end, even though it felt like the scoreline flattered us a bit. And then they said, "Is that all you've got?" And we're like just laughing, going, "We've just beaten one of the best teams in the world by 20 points, and you're still moaning about it."
Yeah, if you look back at it now, the points differential. I mean, they played well. I always say they played as well as anyone we played against in that tournament. It was funny. It was a huge game, and I'd never been more nervous and anxious. The jeopardy of losing that game was enormous. After we'd put 50 points on them, if we'd lost at the first hurdle really in the World Cup, in the pool game, it would have been very difficult to recover. I think Ireland's game this year was a little bit different, because if they won or they lost, they still had a very difficult quarter final. So in a way, it was a bit more recoverable.
Yeah.
But ours wasn't really. And then, they came out all guns blazing. But I remember running out onto the field, finally getting out onto the pitch, and I just looked across at them. They were a very young team, very good, and obviously won the World Cup 4 years later. Bakkies Botha, Victor Matveld, Johan Smit, Jan van Niekerk, John Smit, all these characters. And I just looked at them and I just thought, we'll beat these, because they looked very young. They didn't have the experience we did of Test matches and World Cups and all the rest of it. And I always just felt confident in that game that we'd find a way. We'd find a way to win it. We didn't panic. We got the try. Once we scored that try, they were done.
Yeah.
If you look at their body language, they were done. They were never coming back from it. And the last 10 minutes was relatively comfortable, but early on it wasn't. They had some real pace. They had some real pace in their back row particularly. And they're going to play their best game. They're going to come out and play their best game of the tournament.
I mean, you and I talk about this a lot, but it felt to me like the pressure going into the tournament was probably at its greatest in the pool stages. And then the further we got in the tournament, I felt, and I don't know whether you'd agree with this, that we almost seemed to relax collectively. You know what I mean? Not relax in a mental way, but we sort of always anticipated that we would get to the semi-final and then the final. And having got to the semi-final and then emphatically beating France, we kind of just relaxed a little bit, and we were kind of really at ease with the going into a final the way we were.
I think you're absolutely right. Every day that went on before the semi-final, I felt more confident that we would win the game. And before the final, I I used to get nervous about games. I could always mentally put together a scenario where we'd lose in my head at times. But that wasn't a bad thing because it makes you gets you on the edge. I just saw against Australia, I thought we've got more ways of beating them than they have ways of beating us. Now they can beat you because they're a good team. They're smart. They're very good players, defending champions. I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the day of that final, people don't realise it's an 8 p.m. kickoff, right? So it was my 65th cap for England. It was your 84th and final game for England, as it turned out. We had to get through the whole day with all those supporters outside the hotel, which was brilliant to have them all there. But, there's no way you could even escape. I mean, everyone has their own routines. I mean, I was thinking, if we win, probably not going to be back at the hotel for a few days. If we lose, probably going to exile myself to some island far away from anywhere.
We'll all walk into the sea at Manly seafront.
I mean, I think we'll all get on a boat and walk the plank and never return. So, I mean, I remember I spent half the day packing and then half the day unpacking and then packing again and then unpacking. And before I knew it, I'd got to about 7 o'clock. I mean, you're right. It's hard to kill time. I mean, I was grateful that I'd played 64 times for England before that, and I wasn't feeling too nervous. And the other thing I was grateful for is that we'd beaten Australia 6 times previously, right? Home and away. We knew we were a better side than them, right? They knew we were a better side than them, but we still had to go out there and do it.
Yeah.
And I think
still got to go and do it again, haven't you?
And I think we realised that. And as it turned out, they played probably their best game of rugby against us, even though it wasn't a great quality game, because it's a final, and they never are, as people see. There's often mistakes. There can be, big things that can turn games, but we got the job done in the end.
Yeah, you're right. It's a long, long day, and again, you say experience. We'd been there, haven't we? We'd done it. We've played a lot of evening games, particularly down there. So you just get into a routine, and my thing was I just cut the day in half really, and we'd probably go out. We'd probably go out and do a bit of a training session, or team, not a training session, sort of run through.
Yeah.
You walk through, it's sort of late morning. Come back and have some lunch, and then I'd go and try and just lay down. I maybe wouldn't have slept, but certainly close my eyes for an hour or 90 minutes. Just
that's dangerous. That's dangerous. You lying down with your eyes closed but not asleep. No. you don't want to walk into that room, I can assure you.
But just not be burning too much, not burning nervous energy thinking about the game too much. Then when you come out of that, you go and eat again, and then you're in it. Then it's like waking up in the morning, and the game's not too far away because, like you say, waiting for whatever time we left the hotel, 5:30, 6 o'clock. It's a long old wait.
Yeah, and well, I mean, I remember winning that Lions series with you and many others in '97, and I was 24. And my view was, well, if we just won a Lions series in South Africa, anything and everything from that moment onwards is possible and achievable. But I do. People say, what's the most enjoyable part of 2003? And I still live and stand by this, is that in the changing room afterwards, when we were sat there, and there was all sorts of emotions. There were people in tears. There were people laughing. There were all the players who hadn't played, which is a really tough thing to do, to sit and watch a World Cup and not having played because you all want to be part of it. There were all the staff, all the people that probably weren't part of that. Somehow Daniel Craig had managed to, find his way in there. I can't quite remember. And I just knew that we had about an hour together where it was just the best feeling in the world. But I knew from that moment onwards that team would never be the same again. And that, for me, is the hour that I cherish probably more than anything else in my rugby career, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think you're right, to actually go and do it. Because, 97 was a great tour, but we didn't have that expectation on us to win. We were out there, played some fantastic rugby, won nicked a series, and it was brilliant. But that was it. It was gone then, wasn't it? That Lions team doesn't play again, and you go back. That England thing was a long time. You'd been in the squad since the mid-90s. Lots of the guys have been around a long time. We'd lost in 99. So that there was a huge amount of pressure, external, internal, whatever, on us to win it. So what was that the greatest 7 weeks of fun enjoyment of your rugby? No, probably not. But it's something you have to do. You have to do this to get where you want to be in that changing room with the cup. So, in terms of that, in terms of satisfaction, absolutely yes,
Yeah.
absolutely yes. And yeah, what do you do? I mean, that's a difficult thing. Once you get there, what do you do? I mean, it was you don't think about that moment.
Yeah.
You only think about the bit before the whistle goes. So we took care of that bit eventually, and then the rest of it sort of happens, and is gone, like you say, gone very, very quickly.
Do you know what? The thing that disappoints me the most is not that England haven't that we, everyone thinks, oh, England have been in finals since 2003, but haven't managed to get over the line, and people go, oh, you must be really pleased about that because it means that your after dinner rate is still at the. I said, no, I don't, because actually, I want every other England player that played after me to experience that same feeling that we had, and I genuinely mean that, and the fact that they haven't actually disappoints me. And the legacy of winning that World Cup should have been probably more than it has been. It's we put so much effort into winning the trophy, but I don't think really anyone, even ourselves, but the powers that be, the governing body, put any effort into what happened afterwards. And I think for me, having done this, the Boys of Winter with interviewing every single player, in the book, and I think there's as much frustration that we haven't managed to win anything. I mean, you were the first coach to win a Six Nations title in 2011, I think it was, or maybe 2010. 11, which was like 8 years after we won the World Cup. And
yeah, there was. I mean, I think there's lots of factors around that. I mean, the guys were. You could see at the time. I think we were out in New Zealand in 2003 when they announced that we're going to go out into New Zealand in 2004, and I remember thinking that's insane.
Yeah, that's when you decided to step down from England.
Well,
I'll give that one back to Lowe. He could captain the squad. I mean, it was
an insane decision.
We got battered. We got absolutely battered.
Yeah, but I mean, worse than that, it probably ended some guys. It shortened some guys' careers.
Having played at the highest level, having been the England coach, having won the World Cup, you coached England. Have you ever thought about? Is there, when you watch games now, is there part of you that still thinks maybe I might have a little role in maybe I'm itching to get back into it, because I don't know. I ask myself that question. I mean, what does Martin Johnson do with himself now? I mean, when he's
I was watching the World Cup final when it was. I was watching the World Cup final when it was down to a point. I was thinking, God, even if I was watching, supporting New Zealand or South Africa, I'd probably be feeling sick right now. No, I'm fine, mate. I think. I'm lucky. We've done what we did. People are, no, I'm fine. I watched my boy play rugby, do a little bit of coaching with him. I'm happy with that. I don't need. I've not got a huge desire to put myself through that every Saturday.
Everyone thinks that it was brilliant to win the World Cup, which obviously it was, because we created a unique memory. But also it sort of affected people in different ways. What do you think, if you look back now, what do you think winning the World Cup, what has it given you that probably people wouldn't necessarily, I mean, obviously we've all, done certain things since then, but is it just a level of satisfaction? I mean, what is it that it's given you?
More of that for me, really. I think just that if we hadn't have won it, now if you're not good enough, that's one thing. If your team's not good enough, there's lots of players, lots of good players who could say, "Oh, I didn't win a World Cup, and that irks me." And you just look at them and go, "Mate, you were never good enough. The team was never good enough.
Yeah.
You might have been, but your team was never good enough. You're never going to win a World Cup." Well, it's true.
So brutal, Johnno. I love it.
True. You have to be good enough, don't you? You have to be good enough.
Yeah.
They're not.
But that's why, yeah. I mean, when I look,
they're not won by the 8th best team in the world. They're won by the top 1 or 2 teams in the world.
Yeah.
So to be in that position was fantastic, and we knew. I think once we started winning those last 2 or 3 years, being in that squad when wow, we're in. We had guys out at times, and someone would come in. Young guys came in: Benny Cohen, Tomo, Benny Kay, Jason Robinson turns up. So you go, wow, we're a squad to be feared. We can beat anyone. But then you've got to go and do that thing and win the World Cup. Otherwise, you're that team that didn't win the World Cup.
Anyway, so listen, Johnno, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. I could talk forever and listen to you forever. I hope you enjoyed this special episode reminiscing about the 2003 Rugby World Cup. My thanks to Martin Johnson. I'll be back next week along with the rest of the team. But don't forget, if you've not already done so, then please make sure you give us a like and subscribe to the podcast. But for now, Thanks for listening and goodbye.